Okay, let's see what happens if we put some SMB on this stuff and try to drop the gold again. So I've been trying to dissolve my lumpy SMB in some water here, some pre-dissolved SMB. Let's see what happens. Anything? Oh, look at that. All right, I guess this stuff's ready for aqua regia. So back in part one, we got half a kilo of dip switches from my friend Johnny. He wanted me to process them and see if I could get the gold and silver out of them. So first thing I did was crush them up as fine as I could with my Mighty Mill ore crusher. And then I took the material after crushing with the Mighty Mill and I used a heavy liquid flotation method to float as much of the lightweight plastic off as I could and concentrate the metallic fraction in the bottom of the beaker. And that worked pretty well. So we concentrated the gold containing fraction and got rid of a good 3/4 of the useless junk that was left behind after crushing up those dip switches. Next, I gave the remains a nitric acid extraction to dissolve as much of the base metals out of it as I could. And now, after a few rinses, we're ready to hit this stuff with aqua regia and dissolve the gold out of it. Okay, time to get some aqua regia on this stuff. I rinsed it pretty thoroughly, but I have no illusions that I've managed to get all of the base metals out of this stuff. Yeah, immediately it turns green. And we've got some fizzing. Yeah, we got some serious fizzing going on in there. Look at that. Oh, let me turn the fume hood on. You know what that tells me? There's aluminum in there. Nitric acid does not attack aluminum. So that's what's going on. Let me put a little more acid in here. And we will just let it consume whatever aluminum is in there. I don't think a little bit of aluminum chloride is going to screw up our aqua regia too bad. I mean, I'm sure we're going to have iron and copper in it too, so probably a little bit of silver chloride residue in here. So it's going to be the usual witch's brew of all kinds of metallic salts that you get from processing e-waste. That fizzing died down pretty quick, so I guess there wasn't a whole lot of aluminum there. Good. Okay, I'm going to put the heat on just a little bit. And we're going to put some nitric acid on it. I'm going to start being a little more conservative with my use of nitric acid here rather than just pouring it on like I've been doing up till now. I'll put it on with a pipette. There's 2 milliliters. There's about 2.5 milliliters, so we're up to what, 4.5? I know there's gold in here, but I don't think there's a huge amount of gold. So that's about 6.5. Okay, so there's about 8.5. Maybe we'll leave it at that for the moment. Give it a stir. Put the lid back on it. And we'll see what happens as this warms up. Turn it up a bit more. And we should start seeing a reaction pretty soon. Okay, I'm just going to let it sit for a little while and warm up and see what happens. Alright, if you watch carefully, you'll see some bubbling going on in there. It's been maybe 5 minutes, maybe not even that long. Just long enough for me to start setting up to filter another project, which you'll see in a future video, so subscribe. I think you'll find that project interesting too if you're finding this interesting. But yeah, we've definitely got some bubbling going on in there. This really hasn't even had a chance to warm up much yet. But the aqua regia is starting to do its thing and dissolve that gold in there. All right, so we're just gonna let this continue to do its thing because it seems to be working pretty good. Okay, it's been another few minutes later, and I just realized I've almost screwed up big time here because I forgot to add the filter. It's got all those little gold balls in them. Yeah, so that needs to go in there so those little gold balls can go into solution. Definitely. We don't want to lose those. Okay, now we've got all the gold in this beaker here. So I'm going to let it go, and if it looks like the reaction is dying down or stopping, I'll put a little more nitric acid on it and see if that revives it. Because I want to make sure I get all the gold in solution. I'll also swish the beaker around and look at the bottom and see if I see any gold down there on the bottom. And, I'll just keep adding little bits of nitric acid and checking it out, seeing if I get a reaction, see if I see any gold in the beaker until it looks like there's no reaction and all the gold's gone. Right. Now I can let it cook because I've got all the ingredients in there. Oh yeah, now we're cooking good. Got some brown orange gas going on. A little bit of bubbling and foaming down there. That filter paper's breaking up already. Oh yeah, we got some serious gold going into solution. Possibly some leftover base metals too. Just par for the course for dealing with e-waste. But I'm liking what I'm seeing. So just gonna let it cook for now. Alright, I just turned the heat down to barely warm because we might be in a slight danger of having a bubble over here. I just knocked the foam down a little bit and it's growing up already. How did I knock the foam down, you ask? Well, with a fine spritz of distilled water from my water jug here. It does a pretty good job of knocking the foam down, but it started coming right back up again. So, yeah, I don't want to have a bubble over. The Corningware dish will catch it if it does bubble over, but I'd rather it didn't. So, I think turning the heat down will mellow things out a little bit, and we'll get this reaction to go to completion. I think the filter paper is falling apart, and the debris from the filter paper is helping create foam in there. So, oh well. We'll get there in the end. So, I'm going to continue to let it go. Alrighty, I think we're done. I put a couple more shots of nitric acid, small ones, in this off camera. And the first one, I got a pretty good reaction out of it. The second one, I basically got nothing. So I think we are probably done. So I suspect we've got gold in solution, but everybody likes to see the Stannous chloride test as proof. So we will get a little on the spot plate here and do a Stannous chloride test. It's also going to be interesting to see just how strong the signal for gold is. So I'll get this over on the bench and we'll do Stannous chloride test. Well, that is some mangy looking aqua regia, but I was expecting that. Let's see what happens. I put a little of this on it. Oh yeah, we got gold in there. Not a super strong indication for gold, but we got some gold in there. Okay. So what do I need to do next? Well, I need to denox that stuff. Actually, I need to do one more thing before I denox it. Let me move the camera back over to the fume hood. Alright, I almost forgot. I need to put a little bit of sulfuric acid in there to precipitate any lead in there as lead sulfate. I've got some sulfuric acid drain opener here, available from any hardware store. A little bit of this in there. I'm going to put a couple of milliliters in, more like 4 I think, because there was solder on the legs of those dip switches, and I'm sure it was old enough to contain lead. So that will get the lead out. Alright, let me go mix up some solution to denox this stuff, then we'll be able to filter it. Alright, it's time to denox this stuff. I was pretty heavy-handed with the nitric acid my last couple of editions, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some excess nitric acid there, maybe even a fair amount. Got my usual saturated solution of sulfamic acid here. I've dissolved as much sulfamic acid in it as I can, so that makes it a saturated solution. It's just a tile cleaner. You can buy it lots of places, including on Amazon. All right, let's see what happens. Oh yeah, you got some excess nitric acid there, but this is going to destroy it. We're also going to dilute the liquid, which will help when we're ready to drop the gold later. Gold likes to come out of a dilute solution. Get all that sulfamic acid in there. Give it a stir. Make sure, yeah, that gets down there and deals with all this stuff on the bottom that might be holding onto some nitric acid. Okay, I'm going to call that denoxed. I am going to set up my filtration apparatus and we'll get this stuff filtered. And then we can drop the gold. It didn't look like we had a hugely strong indication for gold when I did the Stannous chloride test, but there is gold there. So we'll see what we get. But first I got to filter it. Yeah, as you can see in the background, the lab's flooded again. It's been raining cats and dogs for the last 3 days. In fact, I've been working out here in brief spurts between thunderstorms. So I'm trying to get this filtered so that I can get the gold dropping today before I have to retreat to the house again. So, start up the pump here. We're definitely doing a vacuum filtration on this because I don't have time for a gravity filtration. Alright. Let's see what we get here. Yeah, it's kind of green. I was expecting that. It's still pretty hot too. I had time for it to cool off, so hopefully it won't chew through my filter papers. If it does, I'll just have to refilter everything, so I can deal with that. But I'm hoping just to get it filtered here quickly. We got a lot of gas in there. It's very bubbly. That's probably from the denoxing. When you put sulfamic acid in a solution of nitric acid, it neutralizes the nitric acid by turning it into nitrous oxide gas. So I think that's what we're seeing down there with all that foaming nitrous oxide gas coming out of the solution. So, all right, so it's going to take me a while to filter this. As you can see, it's going fairly slowly already, even with a fresh filter. And it'll slow down even more once I get the solids in the bottom of the beaker in there and start rinsing it to get all of the color out of the filter. Because that yellow color up there, that's where the gold is. So, got to rinse that out. Okay, we've pulled down the first load of liquid. Let's put in some more. So far, the filter's holding up. It is plugging, though. I think we have some metastannic acid in here from the tin on the solder on the legs of those dip switches. When it reacts with nitric acid, it makes metastannic acid, which is an insoluble gray goo. And it likes to plug filters. So I think that's what we got here. All right. Get all this liquid through. Then I'll dump the solids in and start rinsing the pregnant solution out of them through the filter. All right, so all the liquid's through, and I'll tell you what, that is some ugly looking dark liquid too. I suspect it's from the iron in the steel springs. Probably those springs have created a lot of rust interacting with the nitric acid, and that's probably what's going on there, making that liquid so dark. Let's see if I can, this stuff doesn't want to come out of the beaker. Maybe I'll just rinse it a few times in the beaker and then pour the liquid out. That might be a better idea than trying to, back, let me get, jug of distilled water is almost empty. Yeah, let me just rinse this stuff a few times down in the beaker and pour the pregnant solution off that way. Yeah, it might work better. Some of this jagged plastic might end up puncturing my filter after all. Don't want that. Yeah, I'll give it a couple more rinses like this, and then we should be good. All right. Yeah, I think that's working. Yeah, that's gonna work. Okay, yeah, this liquid's almost clear already down here. All right, good deal. So let me give this a couple more rinses, and we'll be ready to try and drop whatever gold we can get out of this funky looking stuff here. I'll see you back in the fume hood when we're ready for that. Wow, this is some seriously deep green aqua regia. I mean, it's so green. Yeah, you can see the color there. Wow, clearly my nitric acid extractions were insufficient to get all the base metals out of there. So now they're in the aqua regia. So I don't know what we're going to get for gold out of this. It may be colloidal. I don't know. Anyway, since we got such an ugly witch's brew in there, I've decided to use the good stuff. I got a solution of iron sulfate here. We're going to use this to drop the gold. Whatever gold's in there, whatever gold will come out. Whether we're going to be able to see the gold is a question, a good question. I don't know if we're going to be able to see the gold when it comes out of solution, because the liquid's already so dark, won't know what kind of gold drop we're getting. But if film of gold doesn't appear on the bottom of the beaker in short order, I got a little room left. I can put some more iron sulfate solution in there and see if we can make it happen. So I'll just let this sit for a while and see what transpires. Well, it's been a little while, 5-10 minutes. Nothing has happened. Normally, I'll see gold floating on the surface. I'll see a film of gold on the bottom by now, but I'm getting nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I'm going to transfer this to 3-liter beaker it came out of. I probably should have done that anyway, but I was cleaning it. So anyway, now I'll have room to put in more precipitating agents. So I've got some more iron sulfate mixed up. And, well, the good old SMB is handy, too, if the iron sulfate doesn't produce the desired reaction. But it looks like there's a lot of copper in there, and I'm reluctant to use SMB, such a copper-rich solution, because sometimes I get a precipitate of what I think is copper sulfide, too. So, anyway, let me get some more iron sulfate put in there and see what happens. All right, so let's put in some more iron sulfate and see if this produces any kind of result, because there doesn't seem to be anything happening. And if this doesn't do it, I may have to reach for the SMB bottle, because this is the last of the iron sulfate I've got mixed up. I guess it's just possible I didn't have the liquid as denox as I thought I did. But it's very rare that I have trouble getting my gold to drop. All right, at first I didn't think there was anything happening. The liquid is so dark it's hard to tell, but I do believe there's a film of gold on the bottom of the beaker. I do believe there's. It's very hard to see because the liquid's so opaque. But yeah, I think we're getting a gold drop. So we're just going to let this sit in the fume hood and do its thing. And then after I think all the gold's dropped out of solution, I might leave it overnight. because it got off to a slow start. And so, and then tomorrow or whenever I can get back out here, I'll siphon the liquid off and we'll see what's on the bottom of the beaker. Hopefully a nice layer of gold. All right, so let me clean up a little bit around here and get this back in the fume hood because it's supper time. All right, so this is the first day in a week that it has not rained cats and dogs all day and all night. So the water has gone down a little bit. Not too bad. So this has been sitting here for about a week. I came running out here and I siphoned the liquid off of it, wanting to see the gold in the bottom of it. Was I in for a surprise? That red color, that is not an artifact. That is rust. There's a lot of rust in this beaker. I'm hoping there's some gold down on the bottom of the beaker. Go along with that rust. I suspect it's under the rust. I mean, we did get an indication for gold on the Stannous chloride test, so there ought to be some gold in here. So the rust was unexpected, but maybe I should have expected it because I made a mistake. Yes, I did. And can any of you tell me what my mistake was? I think I know what it was, but I'll give you a few seconds to think about it and maybe leave a comment. Cue the Jeopardy music. Okay, so what was my mistake? I saw all of those steel springs down on the bottom of the beaker and I did not take my magnet to it. I was so excited about how well my gravity flotation system was working with the dense liquid that I completely just missed that I probably should have taken my magnet in there and got all those springs out. So now we've got a lot of rust in here and hopefully there's some gold in there somewhere too. So I guess what I need to do is get this stuff with aqua regia again and see if I can get whatever gold is in here back in solution and separate it from the rust by filtration. So that's what I plan on doing. Made some really nice rouge colored stuff though, I have to say. It's beautiful red color, crimson. But it's not what I was looking for, not what I was aiming for. Alright, let me get this stuff back in the fume hood and get this back in solution. I might put it in a smaller beaker, just easier to handle in this big 3-liter thing. And we'll put aqua regia on it and see if we can get this stuff back in solution. Alright, so here we go again with aqua regia. So, muriatic acid. I'll put a little bit more in than I would normally because there's still some liquid there, so that's going to dilute it. And then we're going to put in some nitric acid. Probably way too much, but there's 2 milliliters right there. Give it a good stir. Put the lid on it and put some heat to it. See if we can get this stuff to go, well, whatever gold's in there to go back into solution, and hopefully the rust won't. Hematite, whatever it is. Some sort of iron oxide, I'm sure. So we'll just let that warm up and see what happens. Well, this is a somewhat disturbing development. Not that there haven't been a couple already with this project, but everything went back into solution. Not just the gold. I'm assuming there's still gold there. But the rust, or whatever it was, it sure looked like rust, maybe hematite, seems to have gone back into solution too. That is very disturbing, because that leads me to believe it's going to come right back out of solution the next time I try to drop the gold. I'm not sure what's going on here. Huh. I've got some ideas though, but let's make sure we still actually have gold in solution. Let me do a Stannous chloride test on this stuff and make sure we actually have the gold back in solution. Then we'll decide what to do with it, because at this point filtering it won't do any good because everything's in solution. Alright, let's do a Stannous test. Well, let's get a little bit of this on the spot plate. See if our gold is back in solution. Well, and it's not bulk, it's got the right color. Alright, let's go over to the bench and have a look. Alright, let's see what we've got here. Alright, well, there's our gold back in solution. That's good. Question is, how do I separate it from whatever that red stuff is? Huh. Yeah, because that solution is not the right color. It's very orange, brown orange, I would say. And, well, that's not the color a good gold solution should be. See what I mean? That should be more yellow, not brown orange. Way too dark. So we got something besides gold in there. I'm going to try something. I'm not in a huge hurry to process this. It's getting late. I'm going to try something. I'm going to turn the heat off. And I'm going to let it sit and see what happens when it cools off. In fact, I might, I think I will, grab some distilled water here. And I'm going to dilute it. And see what happens when I dilute it. And let it cool off. We'll see if all that rust, or whatever it is, falls back out of solution when this cools off. And it's now very dilute solution. And we'll see if the gold stays in solution. That would be ideal, because then I'd be able to filter this. So we're just going to let this sit. Maybe let it sit overnight and see what it looks like tomorrow. Because like I say, it's getting very late. So I need to pick up tomorrow anyway. Hopefully we'll come back and there'll be a layer of rust on the bottom and the gold will still be in solution. That'd be ideal. Things are rarely ideal in my world, but maybe we'll get lucky. Alright, we'll check it out in the morning. Alright, it's another day. And, well, some stuff has settled out. Not as much as I thought would, and it's not the same color as the red stuff. So I'm wondering what's going to happen when I try to drop the gold again. I'm actually wondering, had time to think about it, whether that red stuff was the gold. And some contaminant in that dark green liquid made it come out of solution looking like that. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to filter this, and we're going to try dropping the gold with some SMB and see what happens. So this video is getting long. You've seen me filter stuff before, so I'm just going to filter this real quick, get it back in here, and we'll try dropping it with SMB. Be back in a second. We're ready to do that. Okay, let's see what happens if we put some SMB on this stuff and try to drop the gold again. So I've been trying to dissolve my lumpy SMB in some water here, some pre-dissolved SMB. Let's see what happens. Anything? Oh, look at that. Wow. Okay. So there is a fair amount of gold there, I would say, from the rapidity and darkness of that reaction. I'm going to try and get the rest of this stuff dissolved and just add it to it. And then we'll let it sit and see what becomes of it. So here we are the next morning. And once again, we've got red stuff. I'm really thinking that this is the gold. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking this is the gold and something's causing it to precipitate out as this really fine, almost colloidal red stuff. I got no clue. I think what I'm going to try to do is boil this stuff and see if the gold coagulates a little bit, agglomerates, because it's really, really fine. You see how it's floating? See how it's stuck to the sides of the beaker? Let me see if I can get it to agglomerate some. Maybe it'll look a little more like regular gold if I do that. So I'll put some heat to it and see if I can bring it up to a boil. Okay, seems to be working pretty well. The gold is agglomerating together into a nice little sponge down here. We got some sponge gold, so that's excellent. I think there's some of it's floating still. I think we got a lot of outgassing of the sulfur dioxide from using SMB to precipitate the gold. So hopefully once all of the outgassing is done, the gold will all sink to the bottom and join that nice sponge that's growing down there. Whew, okay. Yeah, the color's a lot less red too, so it's starting to look like gold. I don't know why we're getting blood red gold out of this. It's a new one on me. It's a first. But definitely it is gold, and it is agglomerating. So, hey, leave a comment. Let me know if you've seen this particular issue before and what you think caused it. Okay, so I'm just going to let this boil for a while and see if we can get it all outgassed and agglomerated. All right, after boiling and let it cool and settle, I have decanted off the liquid again, well, siphoned it off, and, well, that looks a little bit more like normal gold. So, good. All right, I'm going to do my usual cleanup on this. I'm going to give it about 3 boils in distilled water and then dry it out, and then we can weigh it and see just how much gold we got here out of Johnny's dip switches. Okay, there's distilled water boil number 1 accomplished. I'm going to decant this liquid off through a filter to catch any fine gold floating in the water and give it 2 more boils, then dry it out so we can weigh it. All right, the boils are done. Drying it out. Be able to weigh it here in a little bit and see just how much gold we got out of those dip switches. All right, so there's the gold dried out in the bottom of the beaker. At this point, I would normally weigh it and try to calculate a yield. But I gotta tell you, I don't like the looks of this stuff. I don't know what's up with it. The texture's not right, the color's not right, and it was red again when it precipitated out of solution. So I think our gold is contaminated with something. What, I am not sure. But I do not believe we have good clean gold here, even after 2 precipitations from solution and a lot of cleanup boils. We got something in here besides gold. It's following the gold through the process and keeps coming out when I precipitate the gold. What could it be? I know there are some possible prime suspects. Lead. Maybe I did not put enough sulfuric acid in the first time before I precipitated the gold, and I didn't put any in the second time. Oops. That's a mistake on my part. We could have some lead. Did a little research. Lead chromate is sort of a crimson red color. There could have been lead in those things. There could have been chromium in those dip switches. There's a lot of red mercury compounds. I don't know if there was mercury in them or not. Possibly. There's red palladium compounds. And all these elements will travel with gold if I can't get rid of them. So I'm thinking I need to redissolve this stuff one more time in aqua regia and see if I can get rid of whatever this stuff is that's traveling along with the gold, because it's making the gold ugly. Should not be precipitating out red like it is, and I don't want to mix it with the rest of Johnny's gold until I get that problem solved. So I think we're going to have to hit this with aqua regia one more time and see if we can clean it up. All right, let's hit this stuff with aqua regia again. I'm going to change things up a little bit. I'm going to use a different brand of muriatic acid too, just in case there was something in that muriatic acid that was causing me trouble. I kind of doubt it, but look at that stuff float. That is not normal for gold. I don't know what in the world we have got going on there. That does not make any sense. Why is that not wetting and sinking? I don't know. Here. Thank you. Huh. That is very odd behavior. We got something there besides gold. Alright, so we're going to put some nitric acid on it and get this stuff dissolved again. Fairly conservative with my nitric acid. There's not quite 2 milliliters of it right there. Okay. And I can always put more in. That might not be enough, but I bet it will be. It ought to be anyway. To dissolve that much gold, I would think. Well, there's a whole lot of nothing going on in there right now. This definitely is not behaving like gold. Yeah, there is some bubbling, a little bit. I mean, it's going to be hard to see on the camera, but I can see the bubbles rising from the mass in the center. So, yeah, because gold will dissolve even in stone cold aqua regia, which is what we've got here. I've just turned the heat on a little bit. But, yeah, there's something wrong with this gold. I don't know about those dip switches you sent me, Johnny. There was something in those. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see if we can get this gold back in solution. Then I'm going to hit it with a goodly amount of sulfuric acid and dilute it really well. And then we'll filter it and see what the third drop looks like. I don't know. Don't know what else to do. Okay. We'll see if this stuff goes into solution as it warms up. It ought to. It all came out of solution. Let's see what happens. Well, it's been a few minutes. The liquid's starting to take on the color of aqua regia dissolving gold, and you can probably see the little bit of bubbling going on in the center there. This still hasn't had a chance to really warm up. I assume that once it warms up, we're going to get a much stronger reaction, maybe some brown-orange fumes in there. But it looks like stuff is definitely dissolving. Fine stuff floating on the surface seems to have gone away for the most part. So, yeah, okay. We're just going to let it cook and see how much of this stuff we can get back in solution. Alright, most everything is in solution. The reaction got pretty vigorous there once it warmed up. We still got some brown-orange fumes in the beaker there. I still see a little bit of sediment in there. So, I guess I'm going to let it go for a little while longer. But again, the color's not right. It started out looking good, but now it's sort of a muddy brown color instead of the sort of bright yellow it should be if that's gold in solution. So yeah, there's definitely something not right here. Something besides gold there in that beaker. But anyway, I think we're close enough to having everything dissolved that I can turn the heat off. I'm just going to let it sit for a little bit with the heat off. And we'll see if the little bit of sediment in there still goes into solution or not. It's about supper time, so I'll let it sit. And I'll come back out after supper, and we'll put some sulfuric acid in it and dilute it. And let it sit and cool down and see what precipitates out. Hopefully something will. Something that should not be in there. Hopefully will precipitate out. But we'll be back after supper. Well, it's about an hour later. This has had a chance to cool down some. The color is a lot more reasonable. But I know all that nasty stuff, whatever it was, is almost all gone back into solution. There is a little sediment in there that did not redissolve. I'm not going to try too hard to make it go back into solution. In fact, my next move is going to be try to get as much as possible out of solution. I'm going to add some sulfuric acid to this, some concentrated sulfuric acid drain opener. So I'm going to put a fair amount in too. So there's about 3 milliliters. In fact, I'm going to chase that with about another 2 milliliters, which is probably a whole lot more than necessary. But there we are. Hopefully that will produce some results. And for my next trick, I'm going to dilute it with some distilled water. I'm going to dilute it by quite a bit. Oops. There. You know what? I'm going to dilute it a little bit more. If it is lead that's causing the problem, the sulfuric acid in the dilution should get it to come out of solution. Hopefully, anything else in there that we don't want will drop out of solution too. I'm going to let this sit overnight and see what we've got in the morning. So, see you then. Alright, it's the next morning, and a distressingly small amount of material has come out of solution. But at least we did get something out of solution. I got a bad feeling about this, but we're going to go through with it anyway. I'm going to filter this, get rid of whatever that precipitate is, whatever this stuff is that's floating in it that didn't redissolve, and then we're going to drop it again. So I'm going to mix up some more iron sulfate, and we'll drop it with that. Just go back and forth between a couple of different precipitates and see if we can get rid of whatever's in here. Anyway, this video is getting long, so I'm going to filter this and mix up my iron sulfate, and I'll meet you back in the fume hood when we're ready to drop the gold one more time. Alright, here we go. So everything's been filtered to within an inch of its life. I filtered the gold solution really well. I filtered the iron sulfate solution really well. So we should not be introducing any contaminants to it. And hopefully we've gotten rid of what other contaminants were causing us trouble in here. This is not the most impressive gold drop I've ever seen. Well, there is gold floating on the surface. There is a fine layer of gold floating on the surface. Put a little bit more of this in just to ensure we get a complete drop, though I was not terribly heavy-handed with the nitric acid. I didn't bother denoxing it, but I don't think I was too heavy-handed with the nitric acid, and I put a lot of iron sulfate in there, so any excess nitric acid should be gone. Anyway, we're getting a gold drop. I will give you a look at all the gold floating on the surface. So I'm taking that as a good sign, because the last time I used iron sulfate, there was no gold floating on the surface. So I'll give you a look at that. So there we are, dendritic gold floating on the surface. This is actually finally starting to look like a normal gold drop. Okay. I'm happy with that. We'll see what the gold looks like once it all settles out. I'll do the usual cleanups on it, and then we'll take a look at the dried gold and see if there's enough here to weigh and maybe calculate a yield. So I'm just going to let this continue to settle out, and I will hit the stuff on top with a spritz of distilled water to make it sink down to the bottom, which is a shame because it's so pretty, but it's got to get to the bottom of the beaker and join the rest of it. Well, hey, would you look at that? After siphoning off the vast bulk of the liquid, we've got something on the bottom of the beaker that actually looks like reasonably good gold. Nice. Finally, it's been a hard-fought battle, but this is looking like good gold down here. We might finally have it cleaned up. Got rid of whatever was contaminating it, making that red precipitate, making it look ugly. Okay, I'm hopeful. Anyway, I'm going to do the usual thing. I'm going to give it some distilled water boils and then dry it out. And then hopefully we can finally get a weight on this gold from the dip switches. This video is getting pretty long, So I'm not going to show you all those intermediate steps. You've already seen them. All right, here we go with the first distilled water boil, and I am liking the looks of this. The liquid's nice and clear. All the gold's laying down on the bottom of the beaker. It's the right color. Okay, I think we might have our problems behind us finally. So let me do a couple more boils on this and dry it out, and then we'll see how it looks and see if we can get a weight on it. Finally. All right, finally, we've got our gold here. And I'll tell you what, it still looks a little redder than what I'm used to, but at least it's looking like gold, okay? Wow, I'll tell you that was a lot of work for not a huge amount of gold, it doesn't look like. There's enough here that we can weigh it. We can probably calculate a yield, although, I don't know, Johnny, I wouldn't take whatever yield I get from this as gospel because of all the trouble I had. Yeah, if and when I do dip switches again, I will certainly remember to remove the springs, the steel springs in them, with a magnet before continuing to process. I think that probably contributed a lot to our troubles here. There could have been all kinds of stuff in those steel springs that kind of got in the way of getting some good clean gold here. And yeah, not a lot of gold either, just as I thought. Like 0.65 of a gram out of half a kilo of dip switches. I mean, I know there was no solid gold in those dip switches. It was all just gold plating, so gold plating is generally very thin. So there we go, 0.64 grams of some strangely red gold. So unfortunately, all of Johnny's gold is going to get reprocessed a couple more times before I pour ingots for him. But I will add this to the 20-odd grams of gold I've already accumulated from doing his stuff. And we'll let it build up to an ounce or so, and then I'll reprocess it and pour some ingots for him for the next time he comes to the U.S. He can take them back home with him. All right, finally done. I hope you folks found this series of videos interesting, educational, informative, inspirational, whatever. If so, give it a like, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to see future videos. I got a lot more Johnny stuff to process. It hopefully won't give me this much trouble. And if you subscribe, you can see those future videos. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching this one. Bye.